Hey guys, it's Miss Wills. Today in this video we're going to talk about Rome Standard 6.67. The standard says, describe the characteristics of slavery under the Romans and explain the slave revolt led by Spartacus. Alright, so we're going to start by talking about the characteristics of slavery in Rome. Slavery was a part of Roman life. If you lived in Rome, slavery was just a part of it. When Rome went to battle with other countries, the people that they took prisoners, which we still call today prisoners of war or POWs, they brought them back to Rome and they had to serve there as prisoners. Now when they brought them back and they were a slave to someone, they were the property of that person. So that person that owned them had a right to sell them when they wanted to. So when they brought them back, they would sell them to the highest bidder that wanted slaves, that were people that were taken from the lands that they had just conquered. They would buy them and they would be their slave. If they ever wanted to sell them to someone else who maybe offered them a higher price or whatever reason, or wanted to trade their slave for, maybe I'll trade you 5 camels for this slave, then they would trade. By about 100 BC, 40% of the people in Rome were slaves. That is almost half. So that is a huge amount of people in Rome that were slaves. Now, Roman slaves would perform different jobs. As you can imagine, they would farm, they would harvest the crops when they came in, they would work in the house with the women, taking care of the children, cooking and cleaning. They would help build roads and bridges and aqueducts. They even mined ore. Now, if you remember your lessons from Sparta and Athens in Greece, then you will remember that the Spartans were most focused on teaching their children battle techniques, war, how to be a good soldier. But in Athens, they were mainly focused on teaching their children academics, how to read, how to write. So if the slaves were from Greece, specifically Athens or near Athens, then they were most likely educated. If you had a slave that was educated, then that slave would probably be worth more and would have a different job. They would be teachers, they would be doctors, they would be artisans, crafters, make jewelry, pottery, statues, carvings. So those slaves had different jobs that might seem a little better than the other jobs, but the thing about it was, even though their jobs might seem a little more important or a little better, they still were slaves, and they were still treated as slaves. Now, if you were a slave, your life was miserable. The slaves in Rome were forced to work long hours, and they could be sold at any time. If their work was poorly done, or if they tried to escape, ran away, then they would be brutally punished. The Romans were notorious for beating their prisoners very harshly. They oftentimes, if push came to shove and it was an incident that a slave had done that they thought they no longer should live, then the Romans were notorious for crucifying them. So, oftentimes, slaves would try to revolt to escape the work that they were given because the work was so difficult and so horrible, and their life as a slave, I'm sure they thought, could not get any worse. So I guess they probably figured, what do I have to lose? I mean, if they tried to leave and they were killed, I would say that some of them thought it would be better to be dead than to continue to be a slave because their life was terrible. Now, Spartacus was a gladiator who had been enslaved, and he led a slave revolt. As he moved through Italy, probably being traded or working, I'm sure he did this secretly. He got together an army of slaves, and eventually, when it was kind of all said and done, his army of slaves numbered 70,000. He had a plan in mind. His plan was to try to reach the Alps where the enslaved members of his army could then split apart and go back to their homelands. However, the Roman army found out about it and they had other plans. So they met him there and they crushed the revolt, the slave revolt, and Spartacus was killed in battle. A lot of the followers were crucified. Now, I'm sure that there were several killed in that battle, but I also feel sure in saying that not all the slaves would have been killed. They would have brought them back. They probably were very abused, beaten, mistreated, and if their life was miserable before, I'm sure it was way worse now. But you wouldn't have wanted 70,000 slaves to have been killed, because that's 70,000 slaves that you as a Roman would not have. So the followers that he had, they came back to Rome. I'm sure that they returned to slavery, but many of them were crucified. And when they crucified them, this was not a private event. This was very public, because you wanted other slaves to see what had happened because they had tried to escape. If you could scare the other slaves, then they would not try to revolt and rebel and leave. And that was the purpose of their crucifixion, their public crucifixion. Okay, so I had to go over and do bus duty, and now I'm back, and I kind of forgot where I was, but I'm pretty sure we finished this slide. So we're going to move right along. All right, I am going to attach after this this video a video that will start out kind of like this. This is not Spartacus, okay? This is not, of course, we don't know what he truly looked like anyways, but this is a clip of the gladiators and a gladiator battle. Now, in the Roman Colosseum, the Romans used to have games. One of their games was gladiator battles, and it was the slaves that fought against each other. Or they fought against gladiators. Now, if you know anything about gladiators, gladiators were trained at a very early age to learn a lot of different tactics, battle tactics, and they were very skilled in what they did. So, anyways, I'm not going to go into a big, long, lengthy lesson about this, but this is just a battle scene of two of the slaves. One of them, who happens to be a champion, he is also a slave, but he has won many, many battles, so he's the champion. And when you were in the Roman Colosseum, the people that were there would bet on you, kind of like at the horse races, on who they thought would win and who they thought would lose. So, anyways, I'm just going to let you watch this clip. So when you finish this video, there will be a link below it, and you can click it and watch the battle. All right. Okay, so I did not tell you at first when I started this video, but you were to take notes in either Word Online or on paper, your choice. You need to take at least 10 notes for full credit. I did, however, write that in your instructions in Canvas. So if you did not take those 10 notes, then you may want to go back and look at those slides and listen to this video again, because it's super short, and get your 10 notes taken so you will get credit. All right, I think that's it. See you, bye.